Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the HomeTech podcast, the real episode 194, not the fake out like we had last week. We got our numbers a little confused, Seth. Jason Griffin here, joined as always by my partner on the podcast, Seth. How's it going?
Good, man. I am happy to be here for the second episode, 194.
Yeah, we can do math.
This is what happens when we take a break, right? This is
yeah.
This is why we have to record every week, because we get our numbers mixed up when we skip a week.
There are systems in place, and when we skip a week, those systems they just totally fall apart. So we we thought we were on 194 last week. It was 193. We are actually on episode 194, which I can hardly believe. We are inching so close to episode 200, which is pretty crazy. And we're here in a new year in CES this week, and a great interview as well. We had Canon on from Digital Delight, and if you're not familiar with JJ and Digital Delight, definitely stay tuned. I think particularly, Seth, for the home tech pros in the audience, this is going to be a really interesting show. They are a company that's really embracing consumer-focused brands. They used to be really a traditional integrator, and they've evolved their business model to quite a different approach to the market now, and are doing very well with that approach. And really enjoyed speaking with JJ and learning about the unique challenges and opportunities that they've encountered, really embracing some of these different brands in their business model. And so I thought that was awesome. And of course, like I mentioned, we had CES this week, so we've got a few stories we're going to touch on there. As usual with CES, it's kind of the Wild West, and there's a lot of stuff coming at you. And I think really our key stories here tonight that we're going to touch on are going to fall into the two key categories that I see emerging from the show. And one of them, actually both of them, I would say, are not surprises. You've got a lot of developments going on with TVs and displays and voice control just everywhere. And I mean that actually in a couple of different contexts, meaning everywhere in the news and everywhere in the home. And we'll talk more about what I mean there momentarily. So another interesting year at CES, and I think a great episode ahead of us.
Yeah, hopefully we can keep the power on this entire time.
That would be ideal.
Yeah. So at CES this year, the Las Vegas Convention Center lost power for some brief moments. I suppose they had to evacuate everybody out. But there were some interesting pictures we'll put in the show notes of a completely dark convention center with all these TVs and home technology pieces and just darkness. All this stuff requires electricity to work, and it was kind of interesting to sit there and see all of these devices just powered down. Kind of crazy. That's not the pick of the week this week, but we'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, we've got a good one. I can't imagine what that must have been like. I go back to thinking about the Super Bowl. I think it was the Super Bowl. It was either that or it was one of the divisional championship games. I'm pretty sure it was the Super Bowl though. And there was a power outage, and I can't think of two worse situations for the power to go out. The Super Bowl and CES, and the havoc that must have caused for vendors there displaying their wares, and just for people on the show floor. That must have been a pretty wild experience. I'm not sure how long that lasted, but hopefully they got that back on pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. The real pick of the week is a fully powered up, what they're calling the LG. What is this? OLED Canyon. And it's really the only way you can describe this. The LG has made this massive video wall. It's kind of wavy. It's got the kind of those wavy screens that you see in commercial used every now and then. And they've made like a canyon that you can walk into out of these super high definition TVs. And it looks beautiful. I'd love to have seen this thing in person. It looks absolutely stunning.
It is. It's wild. I can't imagine what the application for this would be, other than in some sort of commercial or almost a museum type of environment, perhaps. But a really impressive display of technology.
They're just showing off.
They're pretty much. Yeah, you're totally right. I think that it is an impressive display of technology, and definitely worth going to take a look at. So we'll have a link up to that. We'll have that picture up at HomeTech.fm/194. For real this time, 194.
Absolutely. We're gonna give a patron shout out to R2. I'm gonna mess this guy's name up. R2 Rantanen. I know that he was overseas somewhere, I think Finland or Sweden somewhere. He popped into the hub there, our private Slack channel, and had a pretty good conversation going on with some of the guys who are really, really on fire these last couple of weeks. The guys over in Europe, and we've I wake up in the morning and there's sometimes 30 or 40 messages that I have to go through just to catch up with what's going on in the UK. So glad to have that discussion going on. And R2, welcome.
Yeah, Seth, I'm glad you got the tough pronunciation this time. I usually end up getting stuck with that. So good effort there. We really appreciate it. On that note, we want to send a general thanks to everybody who's supported the show. If you're interested in contributing to our efforts here at the Home Tech Podcast, we would really appreciate it. You can head over to HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. If you're interested in making a contribution, you can do that for as little as $1 a month. Even at that $1 level, we'll send you an invite to the private Slack channel that Seth alluded to there, that we call the Hub, which is a really great, vibrant community, international community. We've got people there from all over the world now, which is awesome because you've got dialogue literally going 24/7, and you can get on it at any time of the day and tune into some really interesting conversation going on around the world of home technology. So we would encourage people to do that. One other quick plug that I want to mention before we get into our news. We're going to, of course, touch on a number of news stories from CES before we get into our interview with JJ Canon from Digital Delight. But one of the other things, Seth, that we've been doing that's been well received and want to keep encouraging people to go check out is our Home Tech Top 5, which is a new weekly newsletter that we're sending out every weekend. Typically goes out Sunday morning, so you can kind of enjoy your coffee and get a nice weekly digest of the top 5 home technology stories from the week. We do a lot of reading and digesting of different blogs and news sources from all over the internet as a part of the show prep for this story, and we're leveraging that effort in a new way now to bring you that newsletter as a quick way to catch up, and we're having a lot of fun putting that together. I think it's a number of the stories that are going to be included there are things we talk about on the show, but a number of them aren't, just depending on when things break. And so I think it's a nice way to supplement what we do here on the podcast. And if you're busy and just want to check in and get a little bit of a quick snapshot of the week, it's a great way to do that. So if you're interested, that is completely free. Just head over to HomeTech.fm, and on the right-hand side there, sign up for our email list, and we'll send that out to you every week. So go check that out.
Yep. Well, Jason, it's been a slow week, right? Nothing really to talk about. So
dead.
Yeah, dead. No, this is the week of the fire hose that sprays out nothing but technology stories. So, lots going on at CES, like you talked about. But I think you and I, when we were kind of going through these massive amounts of, I don't even know how we're going to clean up this mess. You basically just walked in with like a ream of paper and just threw it all over the floor, like, and said, "Okay, here's all the stories.
Here's what happened."
Yeah, I don't know how. We're just gonna have to start over. Just delete this whole thing and start over here.
It's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah, the major stories we were seeing were TVs, of course. TVs are kind of like the showstoppers, and we talked about the LG OLED wall at the top of the show there. I think the biggest and most interesting TV I saw this year was this LG rollable OLED TV. And if you haven't seen this thing, you're probably living under a rock at this point. But if you haven't seen this thing, we will include a couple of links to pictures and videos. I think the videos are probably best to watch. Check out the videos because they show you this thing in action. I think the pictures, for whatever reason, the pictures just don't relay what this thing can do. So watch the video. This is basically a TV that's on a roller shade. It's a 65-inch TV, and it can roll down and hide away inside of a nice little like, I don't know what you would call that, just a little box,
just a small pocket.
Yeah.
Hey, I look at this thing and I literally think of a roller shade, just like you said. So you picture you picture like a shade pocket, and when you're seeing it roll up and down, you think of a traditional motorized cabinet roll up and roll down motorized lift. But what you realize is that there's not that full size cabinet below where the TV is simply dropping down into a cabinet. The OLED is actually going onto a roller within a pocket below the TV, and that is just incredible to me. I think the technical applications of this OLED technology, where these displays are actually thin enough and flexible enough that you can bend them and roll them up on a tube, is such a paradigm shift when you think about TVs and display technology, that it is really, I think we're only starting to see those applications and the possibilities there. And admittedly, I think a lot of those really powerful possibilities and things that we're going to see are probably going to be a little more applicable to the commercial world. But I see a technology like this, and I think about all the struggles I used to have when I was in the integration business of doing drop-down TVs and trying to figure out how we were going to engineer a cabinet big enough to hold the whole TV when it was out of sight. And the fact that you can now effectively put it on a roller is incredible to me. And I think there are some really interesting and cool applications possible for this in the residential world.
Yep. And one of the things that they show in the videos, in some of the pictures, is it rolled down to different aspect ratios. So you can see it, you can get a wider angle, wider picture just by rolling the TV down a little bit. It's still 65 inches wide, but you roll it down and you get the wide angle picture out of it. And then also you can roll it all the way down to where there's like a foot showing, right? And with that, they have this really cool demo of all these like little widgets, like weather widgets and what news widgets and things that are going on. So you can have like a little dashboard running on it right there in the morning. That would be awesome to have, just kind of look over, see the TV just kind of peeking up out of the cabinet, right? And it just kind of showing you what the weather's going to be, what the news is, what the traffic looks like. I think this is, people are in TJ's in the chat room saying this is the future of home cinemas. I don't think so. I think cinema is going to go a different direction. This is kind of the future of like the living room TV is where I would put this. Like this screams living room or master bedroom, hide it out of the way. If indeed it ever does come to market, it would be, I would say that's where this would go. Hide a TV, get it out of the way. I have a big TV hanging in my living room, and I hate walking in the door and seeing this giant black TV sitting on the wall. Like, no one likes that. So if I can roll it up and put it out of the way when it's not in use, perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this idea.
No, it's pretty cool. I think it definitely is the coolest TV technology that I have seen at the show this year. Although there's always a ton of really cool display stories, and it is, to me, by far the number one thing I look forward to at CES every year is seeing what the display manufacturers are doing, and it's always the big show for them. And so this year was no exception. One of the other big stories, and there was a bunch of them. Samsung has this new 146-inch, what they are calling a modular TV. It uses what they're referring to as micro LED technology for, quote, a picture that rivals OLED. And going to read from The Verge here for just a second. Samsung has come to CES 2018 with enormous 4K TV it's calling the Wall. It's claiming it to be the world's first modular TV. 146 inches, shares many benefits with OLED. Each microscopic LED can emit its own light, meaning no backlight is required, which creates the deep blacks and lush colors normally reserved for OLED sets, and also gets incredibly bright. So, there's some interesting things you can read about this TV as well. To me, Seth, it's funny, you read about all these technologies, and if it feels to me like if it's not OLED, it's a technology that's trying to market itself as comparable with OLED, which, I think really speaks to the fact that OLED technology is starting to set the real bar for picture quality, and everybody else is trying to keep up, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't really thought of it in that in that perspective. But yeah, everybody, you're right. Everybody is measuring off OLED because they have all gone, I guess, and seen what the OLEDs can do. I think this is a pretty cool panel. The modularity stuff is nothing new. You see these in commercial, used all the time, where they're doing giant video walls with these modular panels that they kind of strap together. But Samsung has done something really cool with this. I think this micro, what do they call it? Micro LED technology looks kind of interesting. So I'm interested to see where they go with that. A TV of that size, a modular TV of that size is nothing really new. I think I saw a bigger one that Sony made at CES not CES, Infocom this last year. So I'll be interested to see what they can do with this, because modular TVs implies that you can get how many panels that you need and strap them together, and that's the size of the TV that you have.
Right.
So hoping that they do something with that. Like what if you just go to the Samsung store and buy like, I need 4 panels. Well, yeah, you have a 50-inch TV, or, I need 8 panels to get a bigger one, like that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the other display technologies, you've got Sony has a follow-up to their OLED. So that was a big story last year. OLED, LG really had the market seemingly cornered, and they were the only really consumer brand doing OLED. Panasonic has a number of OLED models, and they're showing a few this year, but they're really, I think, more focused on the reference market. So in video editing studios and things of that nature. In the consumer market, OLED has really belonged to LG in the past couple of years, but Sony is following up on theirs. So they've got a new model out. They've also got I'm quoting from a story here, a high-style 4K projector, according to a story from CNET. This looks like, I think, like a short-throw projector. Yeah, the LSPX A1, novel short-throw projector.
Great names by Sony
so it's
again.
Designed to look, beautiful name, gorgeous name. That was a stroke of genius there. But it looks like a credenza. Basically, it's designed to look like a credenza, and sits right under a projection screen and throws a 4K image up on the wall. And short throw projection, I think, is a really cool technology. I didn't do a lot with that when I was working as an integrator, but I know that in certain applications it's very useful. So it's kind of cool to see them showing that as well.
Yeah, they've had this thing. It's been out for a couple of years. I think it floated near $50,000 when it first came out, and it's dropped down. This one's going for $30,000. But they basically, it looks like they've strapped some legs on it and made it look like furniture. They've had this particular device out for a couple of years, and it's been pretty popular, right, from what I understand. Because a 4K image, $40,000 for the projector that does a short throw in the right application. Hey, that's great. That's great.
Yep. One other TV that we wanted to talk about in particular, and there was 100 of these stories at CES, so definitely a big theme there as usual. But the TCL, and I think the biggest thing, more so, Seth, to me than the specifics of the TCL 6 Series. It's a Roku TV, metal design, 4K, Dolby Vision. It's got a nice, the metal bezel, all that. That's great. I think the bigger story to me, Seth, when I look at this, is that 2 years ago, or maybe arguably even a year ago, I looked at TCL TVs, and every time I saw a story, it was kind of like, who is TCL? Like, I don't know who that is. And we're seeing more and more of them. I know they're I think the largest TV maker in China, so a very popular global brand when it comes to display technology. But I see them making continual inroads here in the U.S., and I think that's a really interesting story, and I think they're one to watch. They've got very competitively priced TVs. I think that the quality, from what I hear, seems to be great, and they're pushing new features and really doing, keeping up, at least from a feature standpoint and a spec sheet standpoint, with all of the other key players when you think about TV technology. And so I think TCL is definitely one to watch.
Yeah, definitely, especially with that Roku built in. I've used one of the older, crummier ones. The picture was not great, but it had the Roku built in, and the experience of actually using the TV, just the basic TV, was great. It had Netflix built into it, Amazon, all the apps that you can get on Roku. built right into it. So I got to say, if they're going to do some higher end TVs, these are all 4K 240 hertz. Like these are the real deal. Like they're not doing these like they still have their budget line, but these look really nice as far as the specs go. So we'll be keeping an eye on TCL in the future. It's kind of like out of the blue. It seems like Vizio did this, right? Like where they started off as like the bargain basement brand and then started working their way up. And I think Vizio actually has some higher end line models now too.
Yeah. Big Nate, an old friend of mine from AV Shop Talk, is who's a great podcast that we've mentioned a couple times on the show, is joining us in the chat room tonight, and incidentally says he has a TCL Roku TV, a 40-inch that he got for $200, which is crazy. I know that's a small display, but still $200 is such a low price point. He's saying the picture quality on it is okay, not the greatest, but you look at the price point and there you go. And I'm not sure how old that TV is or how many years ago he bought it, but I am hearing
it doesn't really matter. I mean, $150, $170 for an Apple TV.
Yeah,
and I still have to buy the TV, right. So that's great.
Yeah. Roku built in, exactly. So that's a good point. So price points there. I'm generally hearing better things about TCL as time goes on, and so like I said, it's not the it may not be the TV that you want to buy for your media room or the central viewing room in your house if you're really into video and quality is your thing, but certainly a brand to keep an eye on.
Yep. Well, I got one more TV story lined up here in our TV section, and this is a weird one, right? Every year we hear more and more about the smart fridge, and LG has, of course, stepped up the game this year with a 29-inch touchscreen monitor that runs in the front panel of their refrigerator. What makes this one interesting is this is using an OLED panel that is transparent. So if you want to look inside the fridge without opening the door for whatever reason, I guess at the touch of a button, you can actually see through this. The display will kind of shut off or whatever it does, and you can see through to the other side. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love it. We've seen that ability of OLED technology to completely shut off and go totally transparent. And I remember at one point, I'm not sure of the context, it might have it might have even been last year when we were talking about CES, and they were showing some really cool commercial display technology where you could have like an OLED display in front of a display case. And so you might have shoes or purses or whatever it was inside of the display case, and you could have part of it be transparent, and then you could have the screen start showing images and have certain parts of it go transparent to highlight certain products. And it was a really, really cool application of the technology, I thought, and really, again, I think speaks to the power of OLED and the unique ability of it to do things like that traditional display technologies just can't do. Go totally transparent, fold, roll up, bend. These are all of the things that OLED, from a product design standpoint, really open up some interesting possibilities. And I think this is very cool because the idea of a touch screen on the front of a refrigerator is, of course, not totally new. Samsung came out with theirs last year, and I'm not sure how it's doing in the market. We were kind of joking about it a little bit on the show, but maybe it's being well received. I'm not totally sure, but the fact that
they updated theirs this year.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, even LG, is all in on these smart appliances. The story here that we'll link to in The Verge talks about having smart fridges alongside your smart dishwasher and smart oven, and a smart washer and dryer. Like it's all sounding interesting. Like, but you're gonna have to, if you want this smart house, this like Jetson style house, you're gonna have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to update your equipment, at least to get. And I would personally wait a little bit till they kind of get these things flushed out a little bit more. I wouldn't go all in on the LG smart kitchen right now.
Yeah. I'll just open the door of the fridge.
Yeah.
I'm
right.
good with
Well,
that.
some of these have cameras inside that you can, use your phone while you're sitting in traffic and see if you have any milk. I mean, that's interesting.
It is.
It
is.
I got to plug Mike Wolf's Smart Kitchen Summit. They had a discussion on this, and I think I heard this on maybe one of Richard Gunther's feed, where he was talking about. It was a discussion about don't brick my fridge, and they talked about an interesting business model that could be up and coming, where you basically lease all of this expensive smart refrigerators and dishwashers and all that. So if you want to have the top of the line LG or Samsung or Wolf kitchen, you basically pay X amount per month and you lease the equipment. And when it gets upgraded next year, somebody comes in, takes all the old stuff away, puts all the new stuff in. And I, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that this may be how the kitchen is run in the future. And maybe through technology, I say within a year, maybe it's 5 years, but maybe with that technology aspect, they're able to keep the smart kitchen working for 5 years before they have to come in and actually update it and fix it. But at no cost to you, like you'll just basically know that all the stuff in your house works. If the fridge ever has a problem, it calls the maintenance guy. He comes in and fixes it. So this could be an interesting. This is something to keep an eye on, and we'll let Mike keep an eye on it with the Smart Kitchen Summit. But I thought that was a fascinating discussion about leasing what is a very expensive cost in most homes these days,
right.
Are appliances.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it segues a little bit into our voice control. You mentioned...
You know what's in all of these, right? Alexa. She's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. and that is definitely the one of the biggest themes that I've seen. I've just been following all of the blogs like I normally do and flagged a ton of stories, and we'll rattle them off here in a minute about all the different product categories that I've seen voice control technology, that we've seen voice control technology integrated into this year at CES. But I think before we zoom in and talk about those specifically at a high level, one of the big themes that I think is interesting is the real battle sort of shaping up between Google and Amazon. And last year at CES, the big theme that we talked about and that I think pretty much was universally talked about was Alexa. Alexa was a star of the show at CES 2017, and I think that technology still is right there at the very top when I think about the overall show and what I'm seeing at least come across in the press. But Google Home is definitely fighting back, and that is one of the stories that we highlighted in our Home Tech Top 5 newsletter that went out this past week, is that Google was really gearing up for a fight this year. They were ready to try and stake their claim in that land grab, and they're doing that too. They're up in the headlines. And one of the cool things, Seth, that you actually had flagged a story about and put on our show notes here is a number of products, actually, not just from, I think, Lenovo, LG, and Sony. All three were showing products that were basically the equivalent of the Echo Show, arguably with much better design. I think the Echo Show was a pretty flawed design in a number of respects that a lot of people seem to agree on, but based on Google Home technology. So you've got the touch screen and the display and all of that with a built-in speaker and the Google Assistant integrated right into that technology, and a number of companies showing that product at CES. And I think it's really cool. I like the form factor. I think it's very useful, particularly in applications like the kitchen, and you think about integrating it with a simple camera and at the front door or in the nursery or whatever. And I think there's a ton of really great applications for it. So I think it's cool to see. I'll be really interested to see how these are adopted in the market.
Right. I agree with you 100%. Looks like there's some Henry over in the chat room is saying it's way nicer than the Echo Show. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. This is what the Echo Show should have looked like, and I think Google is going to come in and really own this market for a while. Arguably, this is like a dumbed down tablet, right? You can't download apps or anything to it. It's just solely there to do one thing, and that's be the Google Assistant. And I think if looking at all these mock-ups, actually some of the videos show you it in action. It's beautiful. Like, this is something that I would put on my countertop. And Google Assistant works very well from what I understand. So I think Google has, you're saying they're staking staking out the market. I think they've done a great job, and probably at these price points can steal, money away from Amazon easily. I think the Google Assistant is the product done right. The Amazon, Amazon, and I'm picking on them this year for sure. This is my year of anti-Amazon, I guess. But Amazon feels like we have this saying in sales where you like throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And that's what Amazon as an entire company feels like to me. They threw something against the wall and said, "Oh, look, that Echo. People like that. It worked. Let's make it into a home automation thing, kind of. Maybe we'll throw that on the wall too. Look, a little bit of home automation stuck, and the entire product line has gone that direction where they're just throwing stuff on the wall and seeing, oh, that worked, that didn't. The tap didn't work. Well, I guess we're not going to update the tap, but we'll update everything else. And it's like, all right, come on. I'm glad somebody is experimenting in that area, but man, Google with their first shot at this blows it out of the water. These products are gorgeous, and I would not have any problem putting that Lenovo one that's there with the speaker on it. I would not have any problem putting that in my kitchen tomorrow. I mean that's awesome.
I agree. It's a nice looking product, and I think that the Echo Show missed on a number of levels in terms of the design, and it just looked like a half-baked product. And to Amazon's credit, I've talked to people recently who haven't worked at Amazon but have worked sort of with people who work there or have worked with the company indirectly in a number of respects. And to their credit, they say that company, for as large as they are, still very much feels and acts like a startup, and that's part of why they're so successful, is that they are not afraid to iterate and experiment. And so frankly, my hat's off to them for that. But yeah, with that, you're going to get some swings and misses. And I feel like the Echo Show and actually the Echo Look, which Nate is mentioning in the chat room, which is like that fashion consultant that you put in your closet and gives you fashion advice if you stand in front of the camera. I just don't see those sorts of things taking off. But what I think is the most, to me, the most interesting story that I've seen come out of CES is this idea of voice control really coming outside of the stationary smart speaker, or even the stationary smart, whatever you call the Show or the Echo Look. The idea of voice control becoming more ubiquitous in the home, I think, is going. I predicted on our fireside chat, and we all talked about it, is going to be one of the big themes, in my opinion, of 2018. And we are definitely seeing it without question at CES. So we're not going to dive into each one of these stories, Seth, but I'm going to go down the list. And I bookmarked a number of stories about voice control technology being integrated into various technology product categories in the home. And I think it's a pretty self-evident here. So you've got Whirlpool smart ovens, you've got Moen shower heads, you've got a smoke alarm, you've got TVs, Toyota, Lexus adding it to their cars, Kohler adding voice control to toilets. I'll repeat that, toilets with voice control.
I don't like to flush. I just don't like to touch it.
You've got smoke alarms. I think I said that one already. A refrigerator we talked about. A Bluetooth charger adapter that can add Alexa technology to any newer car, whatever exactly that means. You've got some smart lock stories. You've got a microwave, Seth. You can now control a microwave with voice control built right in. Headphones and smartwatches, another faucet from Delta, and let's see, a projector, and also computers, PCs from HP, Asus, and Acer. So that is quite an impressive list of product categories where voice control is being integrated directly into it. And so to me, the takeaway from that, and I think the important story, is that we've thought about voice control, painting with broad strokes here when I say we, as a market, have been conditioned to think about voice control as a smart speaker, right, that communicates with other systems in the home. And I think 2018 is really the year where you're going to see that breakdown, and and voice control is not confined to a small number of products in the home that then act as a hub and speak with other ones. Voice control is just ubiquitous, and it's built into all of the products around us. And I think the implications of that are really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, it matters what platform, right? I mean, we're talking about the Alexa platform here, but I mean, you also have HomeKit finally coming on, or Siri maybe stepping up. There was a new news in the iOS beta that's dropped that they're actually adding things onto Siri to make it a better service. I guess you're seeing Google step up their game and actually bring this technology in. And I don't know. Like, I think ubiquitous is, I kind of feel like it already is, right? Like anywhere I go, I have my phone and I can yell at it and it'll do something with as a voice assistant. If I'm home, I have the Google thing. Actually, it's not even plugged in. It's right here. But like, I could yell at that. I could yell at the Amazon Echoes that are in the house. I don't know. Like to me, like it feels like what you're talking about is going to be maybe a multi-platform environment for a while, or maybe it doesn't even matter. That would be right. That would be nice, right? Like you would have a mixture of devices. Say you had the new Home Pod, you had a couple of Google Assistants, and whatever you yelled at them, they figured out what needed to happen and just made it happen. That would be great. I really hope. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but I definitely think that's something that could happen in the future. Because it seems like voice control this year is just table stakes now. Like we talked about HomeKit and Google Home integrations last year being table stakes. Now it feels like if you come out with a product, it's got to have all that. It's got to work with HomeKit. It's got to work with smart things. It's got to do all this good. Maybe have some kind of integrations with Wink, but also it's got to have a voice assistant skill attached along with it. So I think this is great. I think this is great for integration and in general, and home automation in general.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. And I think to a certain extent, it already is ubiquitous if you're willing to sort of look for it. But what I think I'm driving at is that it's just going to become increasingly obvious that voice control is the norm and table stakes, like you said. And what we're seeing is the first sign of that. And I still think it's going to take quite a bit of time for it really to become quote unquote mainstream, whatever that means. I think that word is a little bit too broad when you talk about home technology adoption. But the point being, I think we're gonna quickly start to see that thought pattern around voice control being so tightly associated with products like the Echo, and people are going to start thinking of voice control more in terms of the platform and all of the different areas that platform lives. Are going to become just increasingly prevalent and obvious in our lives. And I think that's fascinating.
And keep this in mind. We are still in like super early days of voice control. Like we understand a basic command from somebody. We understand how to parse a sentence. We can kind of figure out a couple of things from that. We can't ask these voice assistants to ask any or answer any random question that is asked to them. They just they fall flat on their face. Every single one of them. Doesn't matter which one it is. And we have no idea how to make that happen. Like that's just something that computer science hasn't figured out right now. We can take commands. We can take command prompt type commands into these things and make them work. But we're still very early day. This is all very, very early as far as technology goes. And I think the adoption rate that we've seen on this stuff is just kind of like one of those flukes. We may have to live with these command prompt type devices working until we can either cheat and make the commands a little bit better. Like I think Google, Cortana, and Josh AI are the only ones that are, you're able to like scream multiple commands at, and they take care of it. We have no indication that Siri can do that. We know that Amazon can't do that. They've talked about putting that in. But that's a very natural thing to do. And most of the products that are out there don't do it. So I think it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of time before we get to the point where these things can answer any question or do anything that we ask of them on command and it feel natural.
Right. Well, I agree. Seth, we're lining up for a fairly long show here. I want to make sure we get into our interview with JJ, but it would not be a CES episode if we didn't do at least one or two sort of wacky products that were seen across the feeds and on the floor. And I got to give credit to you. You came up with these, so I want to let you tee them up. And I actually want to do them in sort of reverse order from what we've got on our internal notes. An $80 Z-Wave mousetrap.
Hey, you build a better mousetrap, and what's the saying? People will bring home automation to your door. I don't know.
Yeah, this is crazy. So, Domeha.com built a better mousetrap. Like you said, it's called the Mouser. $80 is what this thing sells for. Apparently at Amazon, Home Depot, Walmart, and a couple of other places here. Pair the Mouser with your Z-Wave hub and never worry about bloody mouse traps again. Configure your system to notify you immediately when a mouse is caught or remind you to refresh the bait so there's never a smelly surprise waiting for you. The Mouser is also more humane than alternatives since it works by electrocution and is quick, painless, and mess-free.
It's like
so
Edison.
An $80 mousetrap. Yeah. I don't know. I posted I think a video, or might have just sent it to you privately, of a mouse incident, I'll say.
Oh yeah,
that I had in my house about a year ago or so, and the $10 or less pack of 4 traps that I bought did the job just fine. So I'm not sure about spending $80 on a mouse trap. But, I guess the market will decide if this makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, wouldn't it be nice for you to know that the mouse was electrocuted and caught in there? Like it can remotely tell you that, right? So
yeah, well, here's the thing. I already had a drop cam and I get it. So what's funny about it, right, is I get it. I see the value proposition in the sense that, like, if there's a mouse in your house, like, that is something to me that is very upsetting. Like, that's not something I deal with on a regular basis. And so I actually want to know, like, if the mouse has been trapped, because I don't know about you, Seth, but I don't frequently have mice in my house, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. And so funny enough, I set up the little drop cam and set up some motion alerts and ended up with what I'll describe simply as some very funny footage, rather morbid, but it served its purpose. I got my notification, I knew the mouse was dead, and we'll leave it at that, right? And that cost me effectively nothing because I already own the drop cam. So there you have it. That's one way to do it. So I get the value proposition, the notification. If a mouse has been trapped, like, totally resonates with me, but I found a cheaper way to do it.
It reminds me of like those videos you get from like the Gulf War where the missile is going down through a building and you see like the guys running away.
It wasn't pretty. I mean, I'll be honest.
These mouse snuff films that you're filming over at your house.
But I knew what happened, and gave me some peace of mind, and that's okay.
All right. Well, oh man, that's great. That's great. Funny enough, you did not share that particular video with me. I saw your reaction to the mouse jumping up, or you jumping off the couch because you heard the snap go or something like that. So I did not.
Oh right.
I didn't get the
okay.
the snuff film.
You got a different angle.
Different angle.
Well, it exists. The film exists. If you really want to see it, just let me know. I'll be happy.
Yeah,
to
if that's your thing. That's your thing. Jason's got a copy.
if you're into that.
Well, moving on to maybe more cleaner subject. That's a good transition, right?
A little more PG.
Yeah. So this is a kind of I can't make heads or tails if this one's wacky or kind of neat. But a company called Tetra has made a $299 countertop dishwasher that finishes a wash cycle in 10 minutes. So if you've got like a couple of dishes that you've eaten, maybe like 2 or 3 dishes, a bowl, some forks and spoons, and a cup or two. You can toss this thing, toss it in there, and run a dish cycle on it. And I want to say it only uses it takes 10 minutes, but it only uses like maybe a gallon of water or less than a gallon of water, which I don't know. Maybe this isn't wacky and this is kind of cool. Like I could see some use cases for this. Like, say you had a lot of my homes that I worked in had those wet bars, and they'd have like a tiny little dishwasher at the wet bar where they'd have to, they could load up dishes and wash them there. Like, this may have done a better job at a much lower price than some of those, high-end dishwashers would have. Right.
Definitely. No, yeah. I wouldn't say wacky. I'd say definitely unique. Very modern design, and could be very useful for the right application. I think a wet bar definitely jumps to mind for me as well. I don't know how useful it would be in my house. The big dishwasher fills up so quick in my house that I don't know when we would ever use this. I feel like we're running that dishwasher like almost daily at this point with 2 kids and all of that. But I see it. I get it. I see the value for the right application, and so I think it's a cool product.
Yeah, I know that feeling now. Like I used to joke that, why do we even need this dishwasher? I have like a couple of cups and a plates, and now it's like every day.
Yeah,
every day this thing's running at night. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. It changes everything.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen. Let's get into our interview here with again JJ Canon from Digital Delight. JJ has a very interesting story. Started as a really traditional integrator out there doing the thing that most integrators start out doing, digital satellite systems, and evolved into big full-scale custom projects, and is now taking a little bit of a different approach and still serving a fairly high-end clientele and doing some really nice projects, but really leveraging, I think, very successfully consumer brands like Ring and Sonos and Logitech and these sorts of products, mixing those into his business model, which is a big story in the industry, and how do you make those two work. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and it sounds like he's having a lot of success with it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our interview with JJ. Hey, JJ, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, guys, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me aboard.
Yeah, our pleasure. We appreciate you joining us. We look forward to the conversation. I know that I personally have been following your story for a little while, since you guys have gotten some good coverage in CE Pro, and I think it's a really interesting story to hear about how you, as a one-time quote unquote traditional integrator, are really still doing your thing, but approaching the market from a slightly different and unique angle, and sounds like having some great success. So we look forward to picking that apart and learning more about your story. But before we dive in to the details, why don't you give our listeners just a little bit of a personal introduction, and just talk about your personal background and what sort of got you into the industry to begin with.
Well, my name is JJ Canon. I'm located here in Houston, Texas. I started Digital Delight in 1999 with my wife, who is a silent partner. I was the kid that could always set the clock on the VCR. And so I was always running all over the neighborhood and helping the neighbors set the VCR. That parlayed into some community work there at the church, working the PA system, and just always had that natural ability to connect devices together and make them work. From that, I started a professional career back in 99, starting satellite systems. And from satellite systems, just getting in the whole technology field, it just kind of expanded as our market has expanded to where we're predominantly focused on smart technology and control solutions and creating positive experiences for our clients.
Awesome. It's funny. I think that's such a similar trajectory for so many people in our industry. Sort of grew up tinkering with technology, and I'm raising my hand here too. And it's sort of one thing leads to another, and here we are in an industry where we're lucky enough to get to do what we love and get paid for it. So that's great. Give us the quick version, JJ, because we're going to get into all of the details and we're going to talk about your unique model and how you guys are approaching the market. But what are the bullet points? What is Digital Delight about today? Where you may have already said it. I apologize if you did. Where you located, company size, that sort of thing.
Okay. Company size, we're a very small boutique company, always have been. I think the largest that we ever got to was about 12 employees. Like everybody, we had to financially restructure, and we restructured back down to about 4 to 5 people. And now we're growing back up to 6. And we feel very comfortable with the type of solutions that we sell now, that 6 people is a very nice, comfortable, scalable position to be in. The solutions that our main focus now is to provide a positive experience for the end user by using technology that happens to come in a box. And that's, my little sales pitch, because I finally understand how to sell the why rather than the what or the how. And once I realized understanding the why, and what we think the why is the experience being after we leave, after we are no longer at the client's home, how enjoyable is that experience that the end user has with that solution that we have suggested and provided and installed in their home. And so that's really what our main focus is. It's not necessarily the box always, because that box seems to be changing, but it's the end result. When we leave, what kind of experience does it create for the end user?
Very nice, very nice. And I've got to say, I have to be careful talking to you on this podcast because my accent may come out. You have a very familiar accent to mine, exactly where I grew up in Southeast Texas. You're just a little bit further over there in Houston, right?
I am, yeah. Right in the middle of Houston.
Excellent. So that's where Digital Delight. So I kind of want to go off on a side rail here. Houston was pretty affected by that Hurricane Harvey this year. Did you guys run into any of that, or your clients run into any of that?
Yeah, the whole city as a whole was really under siege by water for a good week to 2 weeks, and then we are still trying to recover. And the overwhelming support that we saw from our local community, from our state, from the country as a whole is just eye-opening, and really takes my breath away from all the people that were willing to help, to come help us try to rebuild. We're not back there yet, but we're definitely Houston strong, and we will definitely be back in full swing soon.
Yep, that's the rallying cry we've been hearing. Houston strong, and my parents are still in Southeast Texas. Luckily, they didn't get water in their house like most everybody else, their neighbors did. I mean, it's pretty crazy how that happens. But let's kind of get the show back on the tracks here. I just did want to bring that up since you are in Houston there. Let's talk about this. When did you first realize that you wanted to shift from your current model from being a traditional integrator over to your current model?
That's a great question. I guess it was probably about 2 years ago, and we were doing the same thing for the past probably 8 years. And so, which was control solutions in the high-end market, the custom, super high-end custom, where the jobs would average anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000. And we'd probably have one of those every 2 months or so. We have always been referral based and not necessarily we have not worked directly with builders or architects or designers. It's always been very referral based, and that's how I built our business. And it seems to be very successful because the phone seems to just happen to ring. We're changing strategies now to go a different direction. But back to your question, I had the vision about 2 years ago when I noticed that we were competing against everybody else, pretty much selling the same type of solutions at the same price. And I was having to compare my apples with that guy's apples and what is the main difference. And I was so frustrated with that because we were always getting underbid by guys that were coming up in the market and really didn't understand the true business side of a home technology business. And I had wondered, there's got to be an alternative. And the other thing that was hitting us was that and so in this conversation that we'd have at the office, we were always playing on the thing of don't sell out of your pocket, sell out of the client's pocket. And we decided to flip the script. And we said, all right, so if we actually sold out of our pocket, what would that solution look like? And that's where a light bulb went off for us. And we started finding that there were different ingredients in the tech realm that were coming online that could provide us with a very affordable, very minimalistic, very compact, and reliable solution for us, but also for our end users. And so that happened about 2 years ago.
Got it. And so, you definitely made a pivot, and it sounds like it's worked out great for you. But let's make sure. I assume a lot of our listeners have probably read about you in CE Pro and understand a little bit about what you're doing. But give us the quick version of what that pitch meant. I mean, as a traditional integrator, you're using certain control systems and certain brands, and what sort of things did you take off of the table, and what did you replace them with? The overall idea of using consumer type of brands, is what you're getting at, but elaborate a little bit more on from a general perspective on that shift to what I believe you guys call a DIFY, a do it for you model.
Yeah, we call it DiFi Tech, and essentially we're taking consumer products that any person can go into your Home Depot or your Best Buy and go purchase, a onesie. But we're actually creating giant ecosystems for the same client. So our client really hasn't changed, but we're creating giant ecosystems of these smart devices for them to use in an intelligent way. I think one thing that we shifted in that I took completely off the table was the absolute insistency that everything had to live in one app. And everything living in one app meant that somebody had to program that. And I started looking at the apps that these smart devices were providing and realized that, they pay some very high-skilled engineers to understand how their end user can efficiently use their solution. And I also realized that the cellular device was, through reading that the cellular devices were always within 6 feet of a client at any given time. And I started looking at the cellular device or mobile devices as really the remote. And what's the difference between switching between apps than it is switching between your favorite channels on your remote? And so those are some things that we took off, but also saw that we could utilize and grow with.
Very cool. I've tried to use, as an integrator, I've tried to use the products you're talking about, going down to Best Buy or Home Depot and buying them off the shelf. And I've always run into some particular challenges in keeping those systems maintainable and up and going. Talk about a little of, I'm sure you've come into those too. I'm sure you've run into those as well. How are you approaching that and being able to deploy these systems in a manner that you'd be able to service later on and keep up with? Like, I'm thinking specifically of, let's say, Logitech remotes is a good example. Back when I was a dealer and using them, which was a number of years ago, you had to have a login and a username and password. It's basically keeping up with that username and password for that remote on that particular install for that particular client in that particular room. So you can see that, like, all of these things kind of pile up, and if you don't know the password for that remote, you kind of have to go through this massive reorganization or massive headache of going and finding the remote and pairing it back to the software. Yada yada yada. It's just a long process. So I'm just curious. I'm sure you've run into those using these products. I'm just calling out Logitech as an example. But what other challenges? And how have you approached those challenges to make them easy for you and your company to service these types of products that are out in the field?
Well, Logitech was an absolute game changer and probably is one of the sharpest tools in our arsenal now. And we sell more Logitech than I think majority of our other lines or equivalent to our other lines as well. And, I don't necessarily know or have experience with Logitech in the past, but I can tell you about them today. And they have worked really hard in creating a portal for their dealers that allow all the different clients that you have and program a remote for. You can log in remotely from your office or anywhere in the world and pull up all those accounts. As long as you have the password, then you can log into that remote and make adjustments remotely, have the client on there and sync that remote, and automatically they're back up and running within minutes. If for some reason you happen to lose the password and you happen to reprogram the whole thing, I kid you not, guys, it's less than 20 or 30 minutes to reprogram that thing. So as far as the headache, they make it so easy to manage and use. There's my motion light. There we go. They make it so easy to if you have to reprogram it, it's not like pulling your hair out like it is with some of those other lines that we had to choose from in the past. So as far as managing and using that particular solution, I have not had an issue with it, and it's very reliable.
No, I wasn't trying to call out Logitech, although it's a favorite whipping boy of mine from time to time, simply because of the experience I had. I know that they've gotten much better now, and it's a favorite brand of some of the guys that are deploying these solutions in the field right now that are over in our Slack chat for sure. So I know that it's a much better solution now than it was then. But I do know that, say you have something like, it sounds like you're deploying solutions and in the houses that have the ability for you to go in and service.
Almost everything that we're deploying now has some type of remote access. So even our Wi-Fi solutions like Eero, they are designing a dealer portal to where you can manage all those Wi-Fi clients. And if there's any type of service or you need to create profiles with the client's permission, you can log into their wireless service and allow them which allows you to set up profiles or restrictions or time frames for internet use, depending on what devices. Ring is another one. If we need to take a look at Ring and make adjustments in that aspect, we can log in remotely with the client's permission, with their username and password, and review and see what type of experience they're having, if it's in the recording or with the vision. And what we're finding is that the reliability of this transition has created a lot, or has reduced a tremendous amount of truck rolls, which is very impactful to a business like ours.
I think it's interesting to hear that, and I think there's probably a fear, and whether it's rational or not, amongst your quote unquote traditional integrator about using consumer brands, and what is that going to do to the amount of times you have to roll a truck, and when you're not making as much margin on the product, how do you offset that? Because frankly, a lot of times the systems do require a number of truck rolls, particularly in that first sort of break-in period of ownership, and going back there and getting the client used to the system, at least on a traditional one. And so I think it's interesting to hear that your truck rolls and your go backs have been reduced by using brands like this, and I think clearly that is one of the benefits of using more consumer focused, or I guess modern may not be the right word, but products that are really by default built on a cloud architecture and have a remote interface and are giving you those abilities to log in and check on things remotely. Are you using any sort of RSM, like a IHEG, Domo, any sort of oversee remote tools like that, or are you strictly relying on sort of the built-in web interfaces that come with tools like you mentioned, Eero, et cetera?
We are using the built-in tools. We have several clients that we do have signed up for management service of their solutions, to where we can remote in and provide those type of solutions. That remote management are on our legacy systems. We are not in need of that particular service with our newer solutions. To answer your question, yes, we are, but they're for the older systems, not necessarily for the newer systems. I would like to figure out a way that we can utilize that service somehow in the future, though. That is something that we're working with.
Sure, sure. Well, we've talked a little bit about service and some of the potential challenges to using consumer brands like you are. Clearly, there are a number of upsides. Otherwise, presumably, you wouldn't be doing it, right? And so, talk about what some of the key benefits are to using these sort of consumer brands. I know from looking at your website, we're talking about brands like we've mentioned Logitech, but also Sonos and Lutron and others, and maybe name a few more of those other core brands that you might be using as your product mix. And what have you found to be some of the key benefits to leveraging those brands that consumers are more aware of?
I think some of the key benefits are, and there's several. So one, I believe that they're more affordable, but they provide a larger impact for the end user. So the buy-in smaller, the impact is larger. The time it takes for my technicians to put in that same size system as what more of our traditional solutions might have been is reduced from what used to take us, 2 weeks to do, and now we can do it in 2 to 3 days with efficiency. In addition to using the like-kinded products, how we always dreamed about in the old days is can we keep it uniform? Can this system always be the same from one house to the next? And to be honest, if everybody's going to be honest, that's very challenging to do in the more traditional aspect of home control and automation. Whereas if you find a very select group of items to work with, they're very easy to deploy. Whenever you're trying to get a new technician trained, it's a lot easier for them to onboard than it is the other types of solutions that we're more accustomed to. For sales, whenever I go into a client's home and ask, are they interested in a doorbell intercom? If they are more familiar with that brand name, it's an easier sell for the dealer than it is me trying to convince them to buy something that they'd never heard of. So there's a lot of advantages that we have found to selling this more consumer-based solution.
Sure. All right. Well, listen, we've talked a lot specifically about the products and what some of the challenges and benefits are there to the to the specific products that you're selecting. But as any consumer even or certainly home technology professional listening to the show is well aware, products are only half of the mix, and the rest is in the design and how you implement and put these systems together. And JJ, you and I had an introductory call to get to know each other, and a couple weeks prior to recording here, and you told me about a concept that I thought was really interesting, and I'm hearing more and more integrators talk about this idea of sort of decentralizing systems, and you call it siloing, SYLO. Talk about that. Tell our listeners what that is and how you feel that it's benefited your business.
Yeah, we coined a term called siloing, and what that means is we're kind of taking it back. We're kind of going backwards a little bit in how systems are designed, and what I mean by that is that every location is centrally located, and we're able to do that because the devices are being made in such a smaller, more compact design. And these designs are so small that you could actually attach them behind the television with a wall mount type of a bracket or on the backside of the television. And what that allows us to do is take this rack that used to take up, you had to plan for, you take that rack out of the equation. Usually that rack, there's a large investment in that rack. When you take that rack out, how do you do video distribution? Well, we saw that there's a lot of failure points in designing racks in the sense of matrices, and if that matrix goes down, now your entire house is down. Usually that matrix is a very high purchase item for that client, and so somebody has to break the news to them that they need to either get it repaired, which could take several weeks to do, or that they get the opportunity to reinvest into a new matrix. But not only do they need to reinvest in a new matrix, but they also get to pay for the programming for that new matrix if necessary, and the time involved in taking it out of the rack and putting it back in the rack and relabeling and making it look all nice and pretty again. We also had that same light bulb go off with audio distribution. And if you have a 12 channel amplifier in one channel, or 2 channels happen to go out in that amp, well, your entire house is down. And so by siloing, it's giving each location independence, so that if something happens to fail, it happens to fail in that one zone and your rest of your house is left untouched. Siloing also allows us to, if an item does go bad, let's say for somebody, the Logitech, hub goes bad, which has not happened. But if it does, the buy-in is at a minimal. The replacement part for the hub is $99 versus thousands of dollars if a processor goes down in a rack. So yeah, we took the whole rack out of the whole equation. When we talk to designers and homeowners and architects about that, their eyes light up, because now they don't have to figure out where to hide. You don't have to climate control that room. You don't have to run a dedicated circuit to that closet. You don't have a big, massive $40,000 to $60,000 a really nice car sitting in your closet. And so by taking that out, our prices are a lot better. We're seeing a lot more efficiencies and better in performance by siloing. And that system is also expandable. So that same solution can work in a very small home, or you can expand that at will, to the rest and deploy it throughout the rest of the house. Very flexible.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show how well the products and apps and services have been progressing over the past couple of years. I mean, I'm kind of in that same boat as what you're talking about. When I remodeled my house, I put in a place for a rack, because that's just what you do, right? You put the big rack in there. I put the little vent fan to blow back into the exhaust for the air, and it's all done right over there in my closet. And I'm finding myself slowly turning off individual pieces of gear in there, where I had a full 6x3 just add power system in my house. Kind of overkill for my house for 3 TVs, but I've got it. The problem is that I'm finding myself using that particular system less and less each and every month that goes by, to the point where $150 Apple TVs, or even less, I mean, Roku's would do the job that I'm requesting this just add power to do. So I can totally see where you're coming from, and seeing the design decisions you're making and putting out in the field, how well those could work out, because it's working great in my house. I mean, it really is. I've been saying how over the past, I mean, I cut the cord. Jason's talking about cutting the cord, and it's really aiming that direction, to where you don't need these crazy audio video systems in an average house anymore. You could totally get away with having everything siloed, as you were calling it, and have individual systems set up and work that way. So bravo for you for figuring that out and actually getting that out into people's into clients' hands. How are the clients, the end users, receiving that? You talked a little about the builders and the architects liking that, but how are the clients liking that?
Well, let me tell you, it gets even better, Seth. I mean, what's cool is that whenever you use keywords like compact, minimalistic, no wire mess, no dust traps, that they're intrigued and want to hear more. Tell me more. How can I have this in my house? I tell them, you remember that big cabinet that you used to have underneath your television? Well, no more. You no longer need that big cabinet even underneath your television. What we want to focus on is we want to get you a really good television. We want to get you a really nice OLED television. We want to get you a very nice sound bar that can provide you good quality TV when you're watching the television, whether it be DirecTV or Dish Network, or you're streaming, because everybody's streaming. I cut my cord 2 years ago. But you couple a really nice television with a really good sound bar that has all the guts, all the streaming built into it. You couple that with a really nice smart remote that will also control your lighting control. You can set up some scenes or your climate control, and you got it in a wireless subwoofer, and that's it. I mean, it's clean, it's compact, everything is gone, and there's nothing to service. If there's an issue, we spot it immediately, and it's a simple swap out with a very affordable whatever device might have been bad out of the box, which is not a major pain for anybody. It's hey, let's get it fixed, and you move on to the next job.
Right. What you were saying about the matrices breaking down, whether that be audio or video, man, I can't tell you how many times that has happened on a Friday, where the matrix completely goes down. I will never forget being at a client's house at 4:30 on a Friday and finding out a 20 by 20 matrix went down, and this guy was like the biggest fan of soccer, and the World Cup final was on that weekend, and he wanted to watch it on the big TV upstairs, and of course there was no video up there. So
how does that make you feel as a service provider?
it did not make me feel good at all. We got it up and going. We got a TV working for him so he could watch it, and he was happy. He was happy we got it working. But man, it did not make me feel good to be working 6:30 6:30 at night on a problem that should not have ever happened. So I can totally understand having those conversations with the clients, where in this case, a 20 by 20 matrix at the time was probably $15,000 to $20,000. And what you're talking about here is, well, we'll just run down to Best Buy, grab another Roku for 30 or 40 and pop it in, and you're good to go. So yeah, I can imagine that the clients are a lot more happy about that. And speaking of happy clients, you talked at the top of the show about being have always been a referral based business. That's where you get your business from. How has this switch over from the traditional systems over to these types of DIY products affected that referral business, so to speak?
So that referral business, what we found, has expanded. And so traditionally, where we have been referred to in more of the higher end clients, has kind of allowed us to grow that and to be able to be, let's say, referred more to the mid-market, high mid-market. And so those referrals we've seen have expanded in the sense of like, that's really cool tech. You mean that didn't cost you an arm and a leg? And you mean that a professional company came in and put it in and it works seamlessly for you? So yeah, referrals have improved, but what's interesting is it's expanded my market of where those referrals are expanding to.
Sure. So, speaking about the client here, I want to stay on that theme for a second, JJ, because I know you and I have spoken before about a concept that I actually have thought a lot about and wrote a blog post about a while back about really how do you think about the client experience? And I think when you say the word client experience, a lot of people in the home technology industry, a lot of professionals think about the client experience a certain way, and that tends to be revolving around maybe things like a really killer home theater experience or really nice audio, immersive audio, whatever that is. But you think about client experience a little bit differently, and I know that's a core part of what you feel really drives your business. You've sort of alluded to it a couple of times, but expand on that idea of the importance of the client experience and specifically how you and your company define that.
Well, in the past, I had gone to different conferences and they talk about creating this experience. And, as I'm running my business, I keep this in my mind. All right, what does experience mean? And I'm thinking, design a really big, beautiful, loud surround sound system, crank up that sub. Don't you feel it? Isn't that a great experience? And in reality, that's not what experience is all about. Experience happens whenever you leave the house. Experience happens whenever Miss Smith picks up that remote and she hits watch TV, and the TV actually turns on and the sound works and it goes to the particular channel. And if you want, you can drop down the lights. That's an experience. An experience is whenever you're at dinner and your phone vibrates and you realize, hey man, there's movement at my door. That's an experience. That's that feedback, that comfort that I do have some control by using this new technology that has been provided to me. And I really look at myself as, that trusted advisor, for my clients. And so they rely heavily on different aspects of it, control or security or automation. And so those are things that you can build an experience with. So when you leave, they can truly enjoy that solution and find some benefit in whatever they might have invested in with your company.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important distinction. I actually wrote a blog post a while back to that similar effect of, how do you define the client experience? And if you're only thinking about it in terms of those, big killer theaters or really immersive audio, you're sort of missing the point, because ultimately the client experience, in my opinion, really comes down to consistency and do things work reliably and can they count on their systems. And that to me is a much bigger definition and a much more important thing to think about when you're designing systems, particularly as a professional, but even as a consumer, if you're putting things together for your home and really, focusing on that, I believe is hugely important. And so we're running up a little bit against our time, and I want to start to wind down by addressing a little bit of the elephant in the room, particularly, JJ, for the professionals in our audience who are listening and they're sort of scratching their heads and looking at this business model. And there's a widespread perception that embracing consumer brands, DIY type of products, and trying to incorporate them into what you call, I believe, a DI-Fi tech model means that you're giving up margin, you're probably doing smaller jobs, you're struggling to stay profitable, you're generally just sort of racing to zero. Frankly, I think a lot of people believe that, and address that. I mean, what has this move done for the profitability, the sustainability, the cash flow, all of those things that business owners have to think about when it comes to deciding whether or not they embrace these types of products into their business?
Yeah, and that was something that was really concerning to us whenever we did make that transition about 2 years ago, is how are we going to be able to, build a business on more affordable products that have a lesser margin. And, this sounds silly, but we look at it like selling tacos. How does Taco Bell stay in business? They sell a really good product for 99 cents, but they sell a ton of them. And so we apply that type of philosophy to what we're doing. And we provide a really good solution, and we just sell a ton of those solutions. So that's easy.
I thought we had a show title figured out already, but now I think we're gonna have to change it to selling tacos with JJ Canon. That's great. That is great.
Yeah, but so generally, I mean, I appreciate the analogy. I do want to get more specific. I mean, has it been? It's been generally a boon for your business. Talk to the average integrator out there who's wondering what your business looks like today versus what it looked like 10 years ago. I mean, has the number of projects, it sounds like it's gone up based on your analogy there, but sort of average project size, and did you dramatically reduce the average dollar figure, or are you still doing these sort of higher end projects as well as part of your mix? I mean, overall, what has it done for you financially?
So I want to say our ticket sizes probably are about the same. I would assume that most guys are selling packages from $5,000 to $8,000, and there's only very few guys out there that are selling the $50,000 solutions on a regular basis. So, I'm still selling that $5,000 to $7,000 package, and it's easy to do whenever you're coupling it with a high-end television. And when you use a high-end television, there's a lot larger margin there as well. Majority of our jobs are the $5,000 to $7,000 jobs, but we're finding, and also in those $50,000 jobs, those used to be our $100,000 jobs, but they're a lot more affordable for the client, a lot easier for the client to bite off on and afford, a lot easier for us to deploy, but they get a lot more bang for their dollar as well, because the devices are much cheaper. And because they're much cheaper, then it opens up their budget to do something like irrigation control with Rachio, which was one of my favorite products as well. And again, yes, the margins are small, but you're able to put a lot more boxes in there that give you a larger margin. And then again, we're service-based business. And so we make up for some of that loss in margin in our service charges that we charge our clients.
Got it. Yeah. So generally, I think what I'm hearing there is you're sort of refuting this idea that I believe is fairly prevalent, that to adopt these sort of products into your business model, you are sort of giving up those large projects or walking away from that. And what you're saying is there's actually a way to sort of have the best of both worlds, right? And you can still service the higher end projects and still make healthy margins, but at the end of the day, there's a way to do that, embracing more consumer-oriented brands?
Well, that's very much what we have found. It just was so stressful trying to manage those large project jobs, and then with the wire diagrams, and then trying to get your techs trained up to wire that project correctly, to make it look nice and clean, to convince the client to bite off on such a large dollar amount. Those were all very, very challenging hurdles that we had to somehow overcome. And by siloing, as well as providing a lot more affordable solutions that were name brand recognized solutions to the client, it allowed us to provide pretty much the same solution at a much more affordable rate. The margins, in the product, to me, I think that our industry focuses so much on margin on that particular box, and they really need to focus on service. Focus on providing good quality service for technology that happens to come in a box, because that box is going to change tomorrow. Just, the box always changes, and whoever has a better box tomorrow is the direction that our consumers are going to go. So, yeah, I'd much rather sell a name brand product that the clients are familiar with, that has that is a very easy sell, and provide them with excellent service attached to that particular box.
Right. Jason was kind of pointing out that this is, and I think we're kind of basing this on our experience in this industry of needing products for some reason. Well, our business models were all set up around those high margin products in the past. And I mean, I was laughing about this, just thinking about this the other day about if there was even a rumor one of our vendors was selling online, or was selling their product for less than, so many points margin, it would be like, everybody would run to dump them, like it was just unheard of in this industry just a couple of years back. And now it's really interesting that it's kind of gone the other way. But my point is here, your type of business serves as a role model for dealers who are in the business right now, kind of navigating their way through these turbulent times where they're having to come from the higher margin products to the lower margin products. But you're also serving as a role model for people who are getting into the business these days. I've had a number of guys who have called me directly or contacted me directly saying, I love this idea. I love doing home automation. I really want to get started. Where do I start? And I kind of have to point to guys like you and Richard Berry and say, hey, these guys are who you need to talk to or look at and see what they're doing, because I'm coming from the experience of using products that were giving me 40, 50, 60 point margin, which you're not going to get starting out in a business buying do it DIY product. So it's a whole new way of doing business now into the future. And I think you and others like you are definitely on the edge of something that are the future of what this business looks like. So I'm very interested to see how you do, and very interested to see how you progress here in the future. So we are running up on our time here. So let's kind of take a step back and talk a little about a little more higher level things. What's one thing that you would tell a dealer or somebody getting into the business here to include in their business model? Like what's one bit of wisdom that you have to hand off to somebody who either wants to come from the professional side or somebody who's coming into the business? What would you tell them? What would be the first thing you told them?
There's a couple of things in software. Having the right software to operate your business is crucial. Social media is just an absolute goldmine for getting your name out there and being able to have a good social media presence on a regular basis, not just a onesie twosie hit, but on a daily basis, trying to put a story out there for people to engage you with socially. Having product that you are familiar with and you have some training in, and with the solutions that we're providing, you can afford to put it in your own home and practice it on a daily, experience it on a daily basis. Those are probably, and learn to live with it, like we have with our other solutions in the past. Those are probably three key points that I would encourage young entrepreneurs to look at.
Those are great.
Yep. those all make a lot of sense. Well, JJ, we really appreciate it. I know that I know that our listeners will benefit a lot from hearing your story. I think you're approaching the home technology market as a professional from a very unique and different angle, and there's only a few companies out there really like yours at the forefront that are embracing these new consumer brands and thinking about the business a little bit differently, and it sounds like finding a lot of success doing that. So my hat is off to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and join us, and we look forward to staying in touch. If there's anybody listening who wanted to connect with you and maybe learn a little bit more about your business or bounce a question off you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So you can always find us online at digitaldelight.com, or you can check us out on Facebook at Digital Delight on Facebook, as well as Instagram at Digital Delight 1 on Instagram, and on Twitter, I think we're RTI Jedi on Twitter. So a variety of different options to get in contact with us there.
All right. Well, JJ, we really appreciate you coming on the show, and best of luck with everything. We'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate y'all having me.